Let's talk about the coordinate plane. The coordinate plane is so useful in so many ways. I'm going to talk about 3 of those ways. If you've ever played the game Battleship, the goal is to try to sink the enemy ship. So you'll call out things like A2, which would mean read this column and this row, and A2 lines up right there. Or maybe you would say F6. F6 would be this column and this row, and that would be a miss. So Battleship is a great way to show the coordinate plane. Another way is reading a map, finding treasure. Everybody wants to find the treasure, right? We got to follow the directions to get there. And then another thing is video games. Some of you have trouble putting these things down. But video games, nowadays a lot of games are in 3D. And with 3D, you have precise points where you're putting a car or a ship or whatever, or a ball, whatever you're playing. And those 3 dimensions, there's an exact point that represents each of those. So look here, this blue point right here, or maybe even this green point here, those are 3D. They have an X, a Y, and a Z coordinate. All right, if you could get out a sheet of graph paper, if you have one, we're going to follow along now to take some notes on the coordinate plane. There we go. Now let's title this coordinate plane at the top. And any flat surface is called a plane. And on your graph paper, if you could make a vertical line nice and straight in the center, and then a horizontal line in the center, hopefully a little straighter than I just did. There we go. And put arrows on the end. And we're going to label them like this. The up and down one is called the Y, and I'm going to put a capital Y there. The reason I do that, the letter Y has a vertical part to it, so that's what helps me to remember that the Y-axis is vertical. And then the X-axis does not have a vertical part, and it goes left and right. Another thing I want you to name is the origin. So let's put a dot at the very center where those 2 axes intersect. We're going to call that 0, 0, which is also known as the origin. Think O for origin and OO for the coordinate. All right, ordered pairs are made up of an X and a Y coordinate showing an exact location on where to put a point. And we show those like this. So X, comma, Y. So it is alphabetical. So X comes before Y in the alphabet. What's the same on an ordered pair? So alphabetical. X comes before Y. That's easy to remember. All right, now the X and the Y coordinates tell how far away a point is from the origin. So it's all in relation to the origin. So think a plane must run, and run meaning the X, before it can fly, meaning the Y. So the X comes before the Y, so we go left and right first, and then we go up and down. So just like a plane must build up its speed before it can take off. Same thing for ordered pairs. All right, now let's talk about quadrants. Please go back to your graph for a second And on your graph, I would like for you to put the top right section is the first, that's Roman numeral I. And then the top left is Roman numeral 2, which is two I's connected. And then 3 is 3 of them, 3 I's connected. And then 4 is an IV. Because in Roman numerals, you take, if the smaller number's in front, like that I's in front, you take it away from that number, which is a 5. V stands for 5. So this really means 5 minus 1, which is the fourth quadrant. All right, so you got those labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. And quadrants have 4 sections, as we just saw, and they're numbered counterclockwise. In other words, it's going from, a clock goes like this, goes this direction, so counterclockwise rather, would be the other direction. So quadrants are 4 sections on a coordinate plane numbered counterclockwise from the top right, and we use Roman numerals. All right, now there is a little bit of a shortcut that I like to use when I explain how to graph. So that shortcut looks like this. And I'm going to put a star here because I think it's really beneficial if you write this down. If you just put x comma y in parentheses, and then below it put a horizontal line, and then below the y put a vertical line, and then I'm going to write the sign next to each one, so the right side of my arrow gets a plus, the left side gets a minus. The top of my y gets a plus, the bottom gets a minus. And this is telling how far from the origin each coordinate is. And I'm going to show you how to use that. So let's go ahead and start by graphing and labeling a few ordered pairs, and we're going to state the quadrant or axis that they are located in. So what we're going to do next is we're going to graph and label each ordered pair and state its quadrant or axis, and we're going to record the arrows first. So we're going to go back to these arrows I just had you write down, and we're going to record the direction that each part is going. And I'm going to write these like this. Number 1 is going to be point A, which is -2, 4. Number 2 is point B, which is 3, -1. Number 3 is point C, which is -4, 0. Then the last one we'll do is number 4, which is point D at -1, -4. All right, we're going to make another graph, and we're going to graph and label those and state their quadrant or axis. All right, again on your graph, we want to make sure that we bold in a vertical piece and a horizontal piece. And remember that this is my x, and then my y is vertical. It's got that vertical part of the capital Y to help you remember. So -2, 4. On -2, 4 on number 1, I'm going to refer back to this little shortcut here. And -2 tells me since it's a negative, negative goes to the left. So underneath the -2, I'm going to put a left arrow. And then the 4 is my y. Y goes up and down. Look at my axis. It goes up and down. So the 4 is, if it's up, it's positive. So positive is up. So I'm going to draw an up arrow next to the 4. And we're going to do that for each one of these. So I'll show you how to do one, and then you can try the others on your own. So negative 2, 4, I'm going to go left 2. I always start at the origin. So I'm going to go left 2, 1, 2. Don't put a point yet. There's only one point representing this. So left 2 and then up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I'm going to get out my pencil. I'm going to make a mark. And I'm going to label it point A. So put the point exactly where it is and then put the letter next to it. And what quadrant is that in? Do you remember? They go top right is first quadrant, second quadrant, third, and then fourth. All right, if you'd like, go ahead and try. You can pause the video. Why don't you try putting the arrows on 2, 3, and 4? And I'll be right back to check you. All right, now you should have your arrows down, and then we'll go over how to graph it. All right, check your work. Number 2, we had the 3 is positive, so it's right. Negative 1 is negative, it's down. Number 3, we only had to draw one arrow. We just went left 4, and then 0 doesn't tell us to go anywhere. Just stay where you are. And then on 4, we went left 1, down 4. So let's go over to how to graph 2. We start at the origin like we always do. We go right 1, 2, 3. Don't put a point yet. And then go down 1. And that's where our point goes. And we're going to label that B. All right, now on number 3, we're going to go left 4. Oh, I forgot to put the quadrant that B was in. B is in the 4th quadrant. It's in this section right here. So I'm going to put 4th down there. And back to number 1. 1 was negative 2, 4. That was in the 2nd quadrant right here. Yeah, always make sure you answer what the question's asking. Okay, number 3, negative 4, 0. We start the origin, we go left 4. So left 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to put a point right there. And we're going to label that C. And that's right on the axis. What axis is that on? The x-axis. So it's not in a quadrant, so we'll just say it's x-axis. And then our last one, number 4, negative 1 tells us to go left 1 from the origin and then down 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be right there. Put a point at left 1, down 4, and label that D. And what quadrant is that in? You said 3rd, you are correct. All right, one more helpful thing. The first quadrant, they're both positive. So you can just use this as your notes. So positive, positive. The second quadrant, the first one's negative, the next one's positive. This is always the case. So I could say negative, positive. The third quadrant is negative, negative, because it's left and down. And then the fourth quadrant is right and down, so right is positive, down is negative. So as you work more with this, I think that'll connect, but it's nice to write those down to study it first. All right, the last thing we're going to go over is just the trickiest type of ordered pairs to deal with. Those are ordered pairs that have zeros in them. These can be tricky. So, ordered pairs with zeros. Let's go ahead and draw just a small little y-axis there and a small x-axis. And I'm going to highlight the vertical y-axis right here. I'm going to highlight that one. And I'm going to draw an arrow to that highlighted y-axis. And here's what I'm going to say. Any point on the y-axis, again, this is my y-axis, the vertical one. Any point on the y-axis has a 0x value because it is 0 units left or right of the origin. In other words, you're not going left or right at all, so the number that represents that is 0. So an example would be 0, -2. The x part is 0, the y part's -2, so that just tells us to go down 2 spots and put our point. Be about right there. Now, what do you think is true if we're talking about an ordered pair that's on the x-axis? What must be true? And if you said that the y value must be 0, you are correct. So we'll just draw another quick sketch for that one. So draw a short little y-axis there, small x-axis, and we'll label the x. I'm going to highlight the x-axis, the horizontal one. And any point that's on the x-axis has a 0 y value because it is 0 units up or down from the origin. In other words, any point that's on this line does not go up or down in relation to the origin. It's on the same level. That's why the y value must always be 0, no matter where it is. So we'll end with an example. If we said -2, 0, where is that point located? We would go left 2, 1, 2, and then up 0, so we would stay put. So 1, 2, and just put a dot right there. Well, that wraps it up. You're on your way to graphing. So when you get into the higher maths, graphing is just such a important piece to graphing. Linear functions, quadratics, I mean everything from this point on in math involves graphing. So slope, so get good at it and practice up.